Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm also really glad that you're here. By the title, you know that I'm going to be talking about my experience with COVID and my husband's experience with COVID. It is not fun, friends, but I know that there's lots of things that prior to coming down with the sickness, I had a really high paranoia for getting it. I'll go into how Matt and I were quarantining and social distancing and all those things, but I was really concerned about if I felt even a little bit off, like I didn't feel like myself. I was looking up online to see if other people had had it and had shared their experience and what that felt like to someone who's also my own age. So first, how it felt. I actually was the first one to start feeling symptoms about 3 or 4 days after where we got it from. So it was about 3 or 4 days after, and it just was really bad timing on our visit to see Matt's parents. And so that night stayed over at their house and I felt completely fine. On the 11-hour trip up to Pennsylvania, felt perfectly normal and nothing felt off. And I know in the past when I start to feel sick, it comes on gradually. Well, this didn't happen that way. I went to bed in a different place and had the window open overnight, no AC, a different state, pollen counts up. So I thought the next morning when I felt like absolute crap that it was just different sleeping conditions. So at that time I felt congested, my face was puffy, I didn't have a runny nose, but I had a slight dull headache just because of how much stuffiness I felt was in my face. I could feel it through here and like my T-zone and around my face. And when I would massage this area, it felt better. So I assumed it had something to do with allergies. That's how almost my entire day went. I didn't feel achy. I did sleep on, of course, a different bed, so I didn't feel as good as I normally would have. And like I said, I felt like crap. And what I mean by that is while I love camping, it felt like I had slept on an air mattress while camping and it was the normal stiffness that I normally wake up when I'm camping, which I'm normally fine with. And I was okay with that. It was the congestion, this head tightness that really was uncomfortable. So thought it was allergies, which I wouldn't say I'm someone who has allergies because these symptoms aren't something I ever experienced. So during that day, it really wasn't relieving. And something like if I had gone camping and was sleeping in those conditions, it would have went away. So I was like, oh, it's probably allergies. So I started taking allergy medication and the symptoms were relieved. So I was like, oh, great, it's allergies. It wasn't until that night around 9 o'clock that I started having shooting pains throughout my legs. That was the first indication to me that I was not feeling normal, that this was not allergies. And then I came to find allergy medication also usually has ibuprofen in it. So I don't know if my aches would have started earlier if I wasn't taking the allergy medication, that ibuprofen was just covering the soreness or that achiness. So I'm trying to be very explicit in the difference between how I felt achy in the morning, that just felt stiff, and the achiness I felt that night. So that achiness was like sudden shooting pains that went off through my legs and through my arms and my joints. So it was kind of like this electrical current. That's probably the best way that my achiness feels when I'm sick and I come down with a virus. So that night I started to feel chills before going to bed, and I did not take any other medications yet. Well, it wasn't until that morning I had a temperature of 101. I woke up and I had sweated through my PJs and it just was very uncomfortable. I knew I was sick. So at that point, I took a thermometer, found out my temperature, and took some ibuprofen and realized that this was a virus, not allergies. Speaking of Matt's, he felt great. It was probably 3 or 4 days later until Matt started feeling anything. We had thought that maybe I came down with a different sickness altogether. For Matt, he felt fine that night, and then the next morning he said that he had a headache, and then it led into feeling sore and that achiness with like the shooting pains all over. That's how his symptoms began. His symptoms began to increase over time. And while I battled feeling achy, sore, headache, eyes, like the eye pain, and a fever that kept gradually coming back every time my ibuprofen was wearing down for about 4 days. And then I started to feel better. For Matt, he had those symptoms for like a day and a half. And I got to telling him, wow, like you are handling this corona better than what I did. And I'm really glad for that. And so while he was getting more sick, I was getting better, and it was the total inverse. And it was interesting because it took him almost a week to feel any symptoms after our point of contact. And it took me 3 or 4 days. Well, around that time, Matt's mom, we were sharing a condo, also began to feel unwell. She had known that I had these symptoms, and we all thought it was allergies when we first arrived. So although that, we were all very cautious and we weren't sharing the same surfaces, and we were wiping things down more than normal, and we felt that we were doing all these precautions. So like while Matt and I have been very precautionary with this whole corona saga, it was like no matter how cautious we were, we still got it just by making one point of reference, one contact, by making one mistake. But then Matt's mom, she's over 50, and she started to feel the same symptoms as Matt, and she slept all day that first day. Matt's dad, he didn't start feeling symptoms, so he got it too almost a whole week after we first said hello to them in Pennsylvania when we arrived. His story is really wild and weird too with how his symptoms came on. But Matt's mom said that she started to feel a little unwell and like a lack of energy the day prior, and she just thought maybe all the walking on the boardwalk was making her tired, or the walk to the beach. But she began to feel unwell, and she had to sleep a lot. She ended up wanting to sleep a lot. And I would say her and Matt kind of shared the same span of time and how they were sick with those bigger symptoms. They each had headaches and weren't very hungry. Their appetite was a little bit less. Definitely both fevers around the 99 to 101 mark. The ibuprofen that we all had been taking, for Matt and his mom, they also had to take Tylenol on top of that to get that fever to come down. I didn't have to. Anyway, Matt's symptoms went away for about 2 or 3 days, and we both thought that we were back to our normal. The same didn't go for Matt's mom. She still felt like she had a lack of energy, and her fever spiked back up one day, like 3 days after all of her symptoms and the fever had gone back down. So it was like that virus was fighting. And I forgot to say that I also was really not only still stuffy, but my nose started to drain and it was really runny at a certain point. For Matt, he went through that same phase too, where very congested, blowing his nose, and very runny. And it led into around the same time for both of us, we both lost our smell and our taste. And I'm smiling because like, it's just so wild and so weird to not be able to stick something that's close to your face and not smell it. Or to put something in your mouth that you know is like either really sweet or really spicy and not be able to taste it. It's odd though, because we could tell that something was salty or sweet or not, but there was zero taste. It's very strange. My taste and smell came back after about 2 days, but here Matt lost it for over 2 weeks, and he's finally getting it back, and he still says it's only about 50% of what he feels that it should be. It's just a crazy thing. So lots of symptoms amongst all of us. And getting to Matt's dad, who's over 50 as well, why his story of his symptoms are so wild is because that morning he felt great, kind of like the same thing as me, felt great. And he went to the beach on his own because all 3 of us were feeling sick. He was there for 3 to 4 hours. He said he walked a half a mile there, half a mile back. He was in the sun, in the ocean, swimming, all these things, didn't feel a lack of energy, felt great. And it was that afternoon he started to feel like something wasn't right. We had told him about how the person that we had come in contact with was confirmed for COVID. And so we made the decision to go home that afternoon. So we packed up, and on the ride home from where we were, back to Pennsylvania, he really started to feel unwell, and it hit him like this, kind of like how it did for me too. For me, from the point of contact, after 4 days I got it, so the 14 days I had it for about 5, and they say you can still be contagious since the first one. So it was 5 more days, and it was like an exact 14 days for me. Matt was a little bit behind me because he started to feel symptoms about 3 or 4 days after me. So his was about a week, and then he felt ill for about 3 days, and so those 4 days after that was still about 14 days. He did take the test, and when he took the test when we returned, it was still 4 days prior to the 14-day mark. He heard back that he had been positive those 4 days prior. So even though he was positive 4 days prior, that doesn't make him positive anymore because the CDC says it's been 14 days. That goes to show that it's been in his system for 2 whole weeks. And we're just praying that the CDC and all these wonderful scientists and researchers know that it's out of our system after 14 days. Thanks for all y'all are doing out there, doing the best that y'all can. And we're all doing well, and Matt's parents are back on the upswing. We would all agree though that our energy levels are still feeling just depleted. I've been combating that by making sure that I'm eating really healthy, taking my vitamins more consistently, and getting back into exercising consistently. And those first couple exercises were really hard, and I couldn't like make it my normal 30 minutes. And y'all know, for me, if you follow me on Instagram, I work out at least 5 days out of 7, and it's for at least 30 minutes. Well, I was barely making it 10 minutes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like what is going on? It's so weird because I felt back to normal, but I just didn't have the energy. I'm building myself back up. And I think that's more than just taking a week off, because I've been exercising like that for over a year, if not almost 2 years. So it's just really odd. And Matt feels exactly the same way. And he started working out consistently at the beginning of the year. So I'm gonna flip into less of how we felt and all that. This is gonna be more the uncomfortable part. This is the reason why. Matt and I have been truly advocating for the CDC guidelines to make sure that the people that we love and care about are safe, and others, your loved ones and you, are safe. And we didn't even want to play with the idea of being a part of the passing around of this virus that needs to be nipped in the bud. To give a little backstory on how we are here at the home, we were social distancing, although the state opened back up, although my job as a teacher and Matt's job is asking for more of us to be in the presence of others. We've been the very most careful that we could have been, wearing masks, wash our hands, don't touch our cat, like that kind of stuff, like handles, hand sanitizer out the door, hand sanitizer in the car, masks in the grocery store, masks around everyone. It's just so wild that while we were trying to be so precautious and still live normal as the state was trying to force things to be open again, that just one time that we took off our masks around others to eat, to enjoy what we were doing while still being 6 feet apart from everyone. We somehow picked it up. Matt and I just keep telling ourselves like, oh my gosh, like we just can't believe we had it, and we take responsibility for the fact that we did. We just truly realized what the CDC is saying is just how contagious this truly is. That while we've been so precautionary, and yes, we could have just locked up ourselves in our house and never went out, it makes it hard when we were doing things for our job, and my brother lives with us and a roommate, and they also were doing what they had to do. We were taking precautions here at the house that we became more comfortable with the precautions we were taking, that we didn't get sick, and we thought that we were doing great, we were doing okay. And so that was a risk for us to take off our masks, even just for a second. I'm still like trying to think about like how I picked it up from this other person, because it's not like someone who I didn't hug them, didn't handshake, didn't high five, stayed far enough away. Just wanted to come on here and to talk with all of y'all, because I really want to bring awareness to this real issue about my experience, so that if you haven't had it and you're just curious about what those symptoms might be, like I was, that there's someone out there giving you their experience, and to talk about how it affected others. And I just go back to thinking about like how it can affect so many others' lives in such a bigger way. Those who are battling this out in the hospitals and fighting for their lives. Someone dying, passing away, these nurses and doctors who are at their, I'm sure, wits' end of being so tired and doing all that they can, doing our best and being responsible for not passing around this virus. It could mean not only our life, but someone else's. And while that sounds like a really, really big thing to say, it's because it is truly that big. The virus is affecting people in that big of a manner. And my heart goes out to so many people I know personally, those who I know as acquaintances, and those who I don't even know, but I'm hearing your stories. I'm praying for y'all. I'm praying for all of us. I'm praying for our country and our world. And I am glad that I've sat down for the camera, got to talk with you guys, and that you decided to join me in this conversation. I will see you in the next one. Take care and be safe. Bye.